From the very first day of this war, I said that that is not the war for the peace of territory between Russia and Ukraine. That's the war for the future of all the free world. And definitely Israel, as a part of the free world, has to do everything to help Ukraine. When Soviet Union fell apart 30 plus years ago, there was at least one dissident, Vladimir Bukovsky, who was insisting that that is the time to have a trial over the crimes of communism. And I have to say, though many of us former dissidents liked it, the world public opinion was not in favor. I remember they were saying, after all, communism fell without even one shot. They lost this war. We are speaking now about the crimes which were made by previous generation, by Stalin and so on. Why to bother? And really, the world really was not interested. But a few years after, definitely 10 years after, when people could see how easily the people forget about the crimes of communism, what is the danger of communist ideology, how millions of people believe that it was better then, you can understand how unfortunate it is that there was no public trial over the crimes of communism. So I do hope that this time the lessons will be learned, and in the end of this awful barbaric war, not only the free world will emerge victorious, but there will be trial over the crimes against humanity, against people of Ukraine, of course, but against humanity, war crimes made by the Putin's regime. And I think the best thing is to have independent international court with leading lawyers. Some of them I'm talking very often, they say, even if by international definitions it's not yet exactly genocide, it's definitely encouragement of the genocide. And by international laws, it is as severe a crime as the genocide itself. So there are enough specific facts of individual crimes and crimes of the system. So yes, I think it is very important that this time the lessons will be learned and the trial will take place. For many years, when I was asked, is there danger that Russia becomes like Soviet Union, I was saying I think not. Why? Because there are no millions working as informers for KGB, and there is no Gulag. So I have to say that now it more and more looks like Soviet Union. Even if you don't need today millions informers like in Soviet Union, you have internet and all the modern ways of watching what's happening with the minds and lives of people. And yes, we are going back to putting dissidents to the labor camps, giving awful sentences simply for saying what people think. And in many other aspects, we go back to the times of Soviet Empire in the attempt to rebuild Russian Empire. Well, Putin made a lot of awful comparisons. First of all, he said that Ukrainians are not people. It's part of us, of Russians. And then, of course, he said that we go to liberate Ukraine from Nazis, and so on and so on. Having said all this, I have to say from my personal experience, Putin personally is not anti-Semite, and definitely he doesn't hate Israel. But the world which Putin tries to create, it's very bad for Jews, very bad for Israel, very bad for any free democratic country and free people. But even if he is not an anti-Semite, no doubt that the danger of anti-Semitism becomes bigger and bigger in Russia, because the war, the suffering of people because of the war, always demands scapegoat. And there is, historically, there is no better scapegoat than Jews, especially taking into account the hundreds of years of the prejudices. So yes, there is a danger of anti-Semitism in Russia today. Israel has tremendous sympathy and support to Ukraine. Our humanitarian aid, all types of humanitarian aid are sent. Our volunteers, whether it is doctors, whether it is social workers, different public foundations are mobilized to help to Ukraine. At the same time, Israel puts on itself very serious restrictions of giving the weapon because, why? Because at the same time, when Putin entered Ukraine and occupied Crimea, he occupied Syria and created the big military base. By the way, it all happened because of the weakness of American administration at that moment. And Putin felt that that is the time to act. But as a result, Putin controls the skies of Syria, and there are the Iranian bases which are in Syria, are the target of our military force every day and night. We are fighting for our survival. And as a result, we are dependent on a cooperation, or at least passive agreement of Putin's regime for these attacks. So that makes it very sensitive. Having said this, I do believe that Israel has to be aggressively involved in helping Ukraine, and the fact that now the tyrants of this world are uniting their efforts, and our worst enemy, which tries to destroy Israel, Iran, is becoming such a close ally. I think now the decisions of Israel are much more simple, and I am glad that there is already cooperation in intelligence information between Israel and Ukraine, and I hope it will broaden even more. I don't like to speak in the terms that all the people are guilty. Thousands and thousands of people went to the streets of Russian cities when it was, when it looked very dangerous, and it still was very dangerous. But at the same time, there are millions who are silent, and that many people who are now running away, immigrating from Russia, many of them were not doing it while Ukrainians were killed, but when the threat is that they themselves will be mobilized, they're running away. It doesn't add too much respect to these people. Well, I don't say that all the people are directly responsible for the crimes. It is the leadership and those soldiers who were making the crimes themselves in the field. But the fact that overwhelming majority of people is silent in view of these awful crimes is very disappointing. It's really surprising how quickly Putin could take the Russian society back to the days of the Soviet Union. Practically with every day there are more and more signs that it is a country behind the Iron Curtain, that the country where there is no freedom of speech, the country where all the independent organizations are prohibited, where journalists can be put with an almost life sentence only for writing something which contradicts to the official line. I would say the only last thing which is still relatively free is freedom of immigration. The moment they will stop it, it will be really, even not Brezhnev's, but almost Stalin's Soviet Union. Well, no doubt, first of all, that it is absolutely barbaric aggression. There are no laws of war. Putin tries to take us back to maybe the wars of 18th century. Not only the fact of the war and the death of the people, but the way how army behaves towards civil population, all these murders and rapes and robbery. It's like in those days 200 years ago when the conquered city was given for a few days to the will of the soldiers. So no doubt there is a lot of similarity with attitudes of Stalin's regime towards the people, towards its own population. If you're speaking about Nazi crimes, and there is a lot of crimes done today, I would be careful to make the full comparison, because after all, the Holocaust meant that all Jews are killed, nobody is taken back for education, there is no difference between children and women and men. So it's not yet Holocaust, definitely not, but it's definitely beginning of the genocide.